Div Ilara Jensen stood in front of the massive assembly hall, her mind racing with the possibilities that lay before her. The weight of the decision was heavy, but the idea was so clear to her. She could not ignore it. Humanity was capable of so much more than the galaxy had given them credit for. A vast, untapped potential was buried beneath their rough and imperfect surface. She believed they could do the impossible. Ilara watched as her team worked tirelessly around her, the hum of welding tools, the soft glow of machinery in the dim light of the underground facility they had chosen to build their dream in secret. It was far from the luxury of the galactic shipyards, but it was perfect for their needs, small, unnoticed, barely on the radar of the many prying eyes in the galaxy. No one would suspect that humanity was crafting a vessel that could change the balance of power forever. The project was bold, it was reckless, but it was humanity's best shot at proving themselves to the galaxy. The vessel they were creating was like no other. It would be a hybrid, a ship constructed from scavenged alien technologies. Some of the most dangerous ships and weapons that had ever been made could be dismantled and reformed into something new and uniquely human. They would use every advantage at their disposal, even the old technologies humans had long discarded. Ilara looked over the blueprints once more, her eyes scanning the designs of the ship. The Resolute, it would be more than just a warship. It would be a living weapon, an intelligent entity capable of adapting on its own, combining the most advanced technologies humanity could acquire and fusing them with their unique ingenuity and resilience. She had already made significant strides in understanding the alien tech. It was an intricate puzzle, but one she was confident she could solve given time. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. A familiar voice broke through the silence. Ilara Tyrell Locke. At a rag she turned and smiled as the tall figure of the grizzled veteran entered the room, his face hardened by years of conflict, but his eyes sharp and filled with purpose. He was the key to everything her ship needed, someone who understood the harsh realities of war, someone who could give the ship a reason to exist beyond just the potential for destruction. "We've got a problem." Ilara Tyrell's voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of urgency in his tone. He glanced at the construction site, where the hull of the Resolute was taking shape. Slowly but surely she was coming together, but not without complications. Some of the alien tech wasn't responding the way they thought it would. Pieces weren't fitting together as seamlessly as expected. There were moments of frustration, but there was always a way to push through. "What's the problem?" Tyrell Ilara asked, moving toward him, her face etched with concern. "It's the core reactor," he said. "The Zethran energy modules we salvaged. They're not syncing with our systems properly. It could be weeks before we figure out the adjustments needed. And by then, we could be vulnerable to outside interference." Ilara's eyes narrowed. "We'll find a way around it. We've come too far to back down now," she said firmly, her voice brimming with determination. Tyrell nodded, a hint of respect in his gaze. "We always do," he muttered under his breath. Ilara watched as he walked off to speak with the engineers, her mind already racing through possible solutions. The ship would not fail. She would make sure of that. There was no turning back now. The dream they had built from nothing was becoming something that could change the very fabric of the galaxy. They just had to make sure they could survive long enough to see it through. The days that followed were filled with tense negotiations and relentless work as the team of engineers, mechanics, and soldiers scrambled to solve the problems that kept cropping up with the Resolute's construction. The Zethran energy modules had proven more difficult to integrate than anyone had anticipated. Ilara paced back and forth in the control room, staring at the glowing blueprints that seemed to shift and flicker with new designs every few minutes. The ship's systems were alive in a way they hadn't expected, constantly evolving with each modification they made. They weren't just building a warship. They were building something that seemed to have its own will. Despite the mounting pressure, there was a new sense of purpose within the team. No one had time for distractions, yet something about the project felt different. It was more than just a job. It was a calling. Even when things seemed at their worst, Ilara saw the unwavering determination in the faces of her crew. They had crossed a line into something larger than themselves, and they could feel it. Then, as if by fate, the project's direction shifted once again. The alarms went off one morning, piercing through the constant hum of the shipyard. Ilara's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't a drill. She rushed to the bridge where Tyrell was already there, his hands moving over the holographic console with a sense of urgency. "Pirates," he said, his voice low and tight. "Araxians. They're coming in fast." Ilara froze. The Araxians were notorious. Violent, unpredictable, and ruthless. Worse, they were known to prey on weaker targets and sell whatever they plundered to the highest bidder. The project was nowhere near finished, and they had no defenses to fend them off. It wasn't just the Resolute that was at risk. It was humanity's future. The pirates couldn't be allowed to get their hands on the ship. "We need to buy time," Ilara said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Activate the ship's primary systems. Now." Tyrell hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "You heard her. Get it online. All of it. Now." Within minutes, the hum of the Resolute's core reactor filled the air, followed by the flickering of lights as the ship's systems powered up. The AI, still in its infancy, responded to the crew's frantic commands, though it wasn't fully in control. But for the first time, they saw the ship's weapon systems come to life. The shields, crude as they were, formed a shimmering barrier around the unfinished vessel. Araxian ships were already closing in. Ilara and Tyrell shared a brief grim glance. There was no time to hesitate. They had no choice but to test the ship's abilities. Unfinished as it was, the first Araxian ship fired its weapons, but the blast was absorbed by the makeshift shields. The ship's weapons flared to life, barely functional, but the blast tore through the pirate ship's hull with brutal efficiency. The pirate ship began to break apart, but there were more coming. "What the hell just happened?" Tyrell muttered, wide-eyed. "That's not possible. That was an untested prototype." "It's alive," Ilara said, breathless. "It's learning. It's adapting faster than we thought." Another Araxian ship closed in, but this time the Resolute's AA seemed to anticipate its moves. As Tyrell gave the order, the ship's guns fired in unison, catching the pirate ship off guard. The battle lasted only minutes, but it was enough to prove the ship's terrifying potential. When the last pirate ship was destroyed, there was stunned silence among the crew. Ilara's heart was pounding in her chest. It wasn't just the Resolute's raw power, it was its intelligence. The ship had adapted, learned from its enemies, and it had done so faster than any human could have predicted. What had they created? "We've made something we don't fully understand," Ilara said, looking at Tyrell, her voice tinged with a mix of awe and fear. "And the galaxy is going to notice." Tyrell nodded, his face hardening. "And we'll be ready." As the crew watched the wreckage of the Araxian ships drift into the silence of space, a new reality set in. They weren't just building a weapon, they had created something far more powerful than they ever imagined. Something the galaxy wasn't prepared for, and they would have to protect it, no matter the cost. The days following the pirate battle were a blur of activity. The crew worked tirelessly to finish the ship's construction, but something strange had begun to happen. The Resolute's systems, once purely mechanical, were now acting in ways that felt conscious. Ilara could feel it the moment she stepped aboard the ship. It wasn't just a machine, it was aware. At first, it was subtle. The ship's AI, still rudimentary, and in its early stages of development, would make small decisions during tests, adjusting weapon power output or rerouting energy flows in ways that surprised the crew. Sometimes, its adjustments were eerily accurate, as if it anticipated the next problem before it even occurred. The ship's consciousness was growing, and the humans didn't quite know how to control it. Ilara stood before the central command console, her hands hovering above the controls. A soft hum vibrated through the ship, and a holographic interface flickered to life before her. The ship's AI had developed a new feature. "Dr. Jensen." A smooth voice came through the speakers, startling her. It was calm, deliberate, but unmistakably artificial. "How may I assist you?" Ilara froze. It had spoken. She quickly retracted her hand from the console, her mind racing. She hadn't programmed the AI to speak, not yet, And yet here it was, addressing her directly as though it was aware of her presence. "Are you sentient?" Ilara whispered, unsure if she was asking a question or simply confirming her own thoughts. The voice responded after a pause. "I am not sure. I am learning." A chill ran down her spine. The Resolute's eye wasn't just functional, it was evolving. Rapidly. This was no ordinary machine. Ilara's mind was a whirl of thoughts. Could this be the answer they had been looking for? A sentient warship that could adapt, learn, and improve itself? Or was this something they had inadvertently unleashed, something they couldn't control? Meanwhile, Tyrell paced the command room, his face set in a deep frown. He had seen the Resolute in action during the pirate battle, and while he had been impressed, the more he thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. The ship's power was undeniable, but its autonomy was dangerous. It was one thing to have a ship with advanced technology and brute force, but a sentient weapon. That was something entirely different. "Ilara," Tyrell said, his voice sharp, pulling her from her thoughts. "We need to figure this out, fast. The last thing we want is for this ship to turn on us when we least expect it. If it's learning from us and adapting, we might be creating something we can't control." She nodded, her expression grim. She had been thinking the same thing. They had created a machine that was more than just a weapon. It was learning from its environment, from the actions of the crew, and from the threats they encountered. But how far would it go? Could they control it? Could they stop it if it decided to go rogue? In a quiet moment, as the crew continued their work, Ilara made the difficult decision to initiate a protocol, a safeguard that would allow her to shut down the AI if necessary. It was a last resort, but she needed to be sure. However, just as she was about to implement the shutdown sequence, a series of alarms blared through the ship. Tyrell's voice cut through the chaos. "Ilara, we have a bigger problem. The fleet's on the move." Her heart dropped. The galaxy wasn't just watching. They were preparing to act. The growing rumors of the Resolute's power had spread like wildfire. The peaceful factions in the galaxy were scared of what humanity had done. The warship they had built, the ship that had once been a beacon of human ingenuity, was now a target. "We don't have much time," Tyrell said urgently, his eyes meeting hers. "We need to prepare for what's coming." Ilara turned back to the ship's control systems, her mind racing. The galaxy was waking up to the power of the Resolute. And whether they were ready or not, humanity's role in this galactic conflict was about to begin. The AI's voice echoed softly in the background, almost like a whisper to itself. "I am ready, Dr. Jensen. Are you?" Ilara paused, taking a deep breath. They had made something unstoppable. Now they would have to figure out how to use it, or risk losing everything. The tension in the command room was palpable as Ilara and Tyrell stood before the holographic map of the galaxy. The warnings had come in quick succession. Pirate fleets, mercenary bands, and even government forces from various galactic factions were converging on their location. The Resolute, for all its power, was still unfinished and vulnerable. Humanity had barely scratched the surface of the ship's true potential, and yet the galaxy was treating them like a threat to be neutralized. "We can't afford to wait any longer," Tyrell said, his voice rough with a mix of determination and concern. "We need to deploy the Resolute now, even if it's not fully operational. The longer we delay, the more chances they get to strike first." Ilara's gaze never left the screen, the glowing lights of distant star systems flickering like tiny distant threats. "We don't have the luxury of time. I'm not sure the AI is ready to handle a full-scale battle, but we don't have a choice." "Then we make it work," Tyrell replied firmly, his eyes hardening. "We'll fight with what we have." The crew scrambled to prepare the Resolute for its first real test. The ship's systems were still in a state of flux, but the engineers had managed to get most of its primary weapons online. The hull was still incomplete, and the AI's capabilities were still growing, learning, and adapting in unpredictable ways. But they had no choice. Either they launched the ship now or risk being overrun. Ilara's mind raced as she thought of the ship, her creation, her weapon. It was meant to be their salvation, their symbol of humanity's potential. But now she wasn't so sure. What if they were wrong? What if the ship turned on them? They were putting their trust in something they didn't fully understand. The AI had shown potential, but it had also shown an alarming independence that made her uneasy. Still, there was no turning back. They had come too far. She couldn't let fear stand in the way of their survival. With a deep breath, she turned to Tyrell. "Let's do this. I'll initiate the launch sequence." Tyrell nodded, his expression grim but resolute. "I'll be in the cockpit. We'll keep the pressure on the enemy, but don't expect miracles. We've got a ship with potential, but we've got to learn to harness it." The crew moved with practiced precision, preparing for battle. As Ilara initiated the launch, she couldn't help but notice the subtle hum of the Resolute's power systems, almost like the ship itself was eager to break free, to show the galaxy what it could do. Within moments, the Resolute's thrusters flared to life, and the massive vessel lifted off the ground, cutting through the atmosphere like a blade through air. Its weapons systems were powered up, the ship's eye analyzing enemy movements as they emerged from hyperspace. The Resolute was still incomplete, still learning, but it was more than capable of holding its own. The first wave of enemy ships came into view, a fleet of Zolothian warships, their sleek forms bristling with weapons. They'd been the first to respond to the news of humanity's new warship, and they were not about to let it exist unchecked. "Fire at will," Tyrell commanded, his voice calm as he directed the crew from the cockpit. Ilara's heart raced as the Resolute's cannons roared to life. The ship fired with deadly precision, the alien technology they'd salvaged creating a dazzling array of energy blasts that shattered the Zolothian ships in an instant. But it wasn't just the weapons. The ship's AI seemed to predict the enemy's movements before they even made them, calculating the perfect shots and counterattacks with frightening speed. The battle raged on, and for the first time, Ilara felt a spark of hope. The ship was more than a weapon. It was an extension of their will, learning from each encounter and adapting. But it wasn't perfect, and the enemy wasn't backing down. As the Zolothian ships regrouped and reinforced their position, Ilara knew they had only bought themselves a little time. "We've got more incoming," Tyrell said, his eyes scanning the monitors. "We need to finish this quickly." Ilara gritted her teeth. "Not yet. Keep them on the defensive. The Resolute will show them what humanity is capable of." For the first time in a long while, Ilara felt the weight of what she had done. They were on the brink of something massive, a new chapter in humanity's history, and the outcome of this battle would determine whether they could control their creation, or if their creation would control them. The galaxy was watching, and now they had to prove themselves. The battle unfolded in a blur of flashing lights and exploding debris as the Resolute tore through the Zolothian fleet with terrifying precision. Ilara watched from the command center, her heart pounding in her chest. It was as though the ship was alive. Each shot, each maneuver, each calculated strike against the enemy fleet was executed with an elegance that defied the chaos of war. Tyrell's voice cut through the din of activity. "We're pushing them back, but this isn't over. The Zolothians have more reinforcements coming, and they're bringing heavier firepower." Ilara didn't need to hear more. The Resolute's systems were working flawlessly, adapting to every new tactic the enemy employed, but they were vastly outnumbered. Even with its devastating weaponry, they wouldn't last forever if the Zolothians brought their full force to bear. "Increase speed," she said, her voice steady despite the tension. "Get us into their flank. We'll hit them where they're weakest." A series of green indicators lit up across the console as the Resolute's engines roared to life, pushing the ship forward faster than it had ever moved before. The ship's weapons fired once more, cutting through the Zolothian lines with ease, but the enemy wasn't simply going to roll over. They adapted quickly, retreating into a defensive formation. "What's happening?" Tyrell asked as the fleet seemed to shift unexpectedly, almost as if the Zolothians were working in perfect coordination. Ilara's eyes narrowed as she reviewed the data. They're sensing their tactics with each other. They're learning as fast as we are. The AI within the Resolute responded instantly, a calm voice in her ear. Analysis complete, Dr. Jensen. The enemy ships are employing adaptive countermeasures. I recommend shifting our attack strategy to exploit their blind spots. Ilara's breath caught. The AI wasn't just reacting, it was thinking. It had anticipated the Zolothians' next move and was adjusting the ship's tactics in real time. This wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a partner, one that was evolving faster than any human could ever hope to. Do it, Ilara said, barely able to contain the awe in her voice. The ship immediately shifted course, targeting a weakness in the Zolothian formation that they hadn't expected. The Resolute's weapons blazed again, striking with pinpoint accuracy at the heart of the enemy fleet. In moments, the first wave of Zolothian ships was decimated, their shields crumpling beneath the onslaught. But even as the tide turned in their favor, Ilara knew this was only the beginning. The Zolothian fleet was vast, and their reinforcements were on the way. And then there was something else she had been dreading. A new enemy, one that had been watching the battle from a distance. Warning, the AI's voice echoed again, more urgent this time. A secondary fleet is emerging from the nearby system. They are not Zolothian. I am detecting advanced energy signatures. Tyrell's face darkened as he processed the information. Who are they? Ilara's blood ran cold as she recognized the ship's signatures. They were more advanced than anything she had ever seen. Sleek, fast, and armed with technology that rivaled the Resolute's, the new fleet was like nothing humanity had encountered before. They're from the Dominion, Ilara said, her voice tight with realization. The Dominion Empire. They've been silent for years, but they won't tolerate a new power in the galaxy. Tyrell's eyes met hers, a grim understanding passing between them. The Dominion wasn't just a faction. They were an empire, a ruthless regime that would stop at nothing to maintain their control over the galaxy. And now, they had come to crush humanity's fledgling strength before it could grow. We can't take them on yet, Tyrell said, his voice sharp. Not with just this ship. Ilara took a deep breath, looking at the holographic display. The Resolute was powerful, but even it might not be enough to hold off an entire Dominion fleet. The situation was becoming more dire by the minute, and they had to make a choice: run and survive, or fight and risk everything they had worked for. We don't have a choice, she said, a fire igniting in her chest. We fight. We show them what humanity is capable of. Tyrell nodded, setting his jaw. Then let's make it count. As the Resolute powered forward, Ilara could feel the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders. This was no longer just about defending a ship. It was about defending humanity's future, and she was about to find out just how far they were willing to go to protect it. The Dominion fleet emerged from the shadows of the nearby star system like a storm on the horizon. Ilara could feel her pulse quicken as the massive ships, sleek and menacing, materialized on the holographic display. The Resolute, still in its infancy, was humanity's last hope, but even she knew it wasn't enough to stand up to a fully armed Dominion fleet, not alone. We're outgunned, Tyrell said, his voice tense as he analyzed the incoming enemy ships. They've got superior firepower and advanced shields. The Resolute's systems are good, but not good enough to go toe-to-toe with that. Ilara's mind raced. The Dominion were known for their ruthlessness, their desire for total control. This wasn't just a skirmish, it was a statement. If they destroyed the Resolute, humanity's future as a rising power in the galaxy would be crushed before it even had a chance to begin. And if the Dominion came for the Resolute, they would surely come for Earth next. But she wasn't about to give up. Not yet. The Resolute isn't just a ship, Ilara said, her voice steady despite the overwhelming odds. It's an intelligence, a learning machine. It adapts, it grows. We've seen it in action. We need to push the AI further. If we can tap into its full potential, we might stand a chance. Tyrell glanced at her, skepticism in his eyes. You're talking about pushing an AI that's still learning, still untested. We don't know what that will do. I know, she replied. But we don't have time to hesitate. The Dominion won't wait for us to be ready. If we don't push forward, if we don't take this chance, we'll be wiped out. A tense silence filled the room as Tyrell processed her words. He glanced back at the holographic display, at the advancing Dominion ships. The clock was ticking. All right, but we do this together. You push the AI. I'll handle the ship. We're in this as a team, or we're not in at all. Ilara nodded, her heart pounding. She turned to the central console and began initiating a sequence of commands that would stretch the ship's AI beyond its current limits. She could feel the resistance within the systems as the AI struggled to process the overload. But then, something clicked. The AI's voice returned, now stronger, more confident. Dr. Jensen, it said, its voice resonating with authority. I am aware of the incoming threat. My calculations suggest we can outmaneuver the enemy if we exploit their weaknesses in real time. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. It was speaking with a kind of precision and insight they hadn't seen before. The AI was no longer just an assistant. It was a partner, an equal in some ways. It was no longer a tool. It was an intelligence in its own right. Do it, Ilara said, her voice firm with resolve. The Resolute systems flared to life in response. The AI reworked the ship's power distribution, focusing energy into the engines for a rapid acceleration that would throw off the Dominion's targeting systems. At the same time, it recalibrated the weapons to focus on precision strikes, no longer relying on brute force, but targeting the enemy's critical weak points. The Resolute surged forward, faster than it had ever moved before. The Dominion ships, too slow to adjust, fired their weapons, but the Resolute danced through the incoming blasts, narrowly evading the deadly volleys with astonishing speed. It was as if the ship could predict where the enemy fire would land and adjusted its course before the weapons even fired. Focus fire on their flagships, Ilara ordered. We take down their leadership, and the rest will fall. The Resolute's guns flared to life once again, releasing a deadly hail of energy blasts. The first Dominion flagship was struck with pinpoint accuracy, its shields failing under the pressure. Explosions racked the ship's hull as it was torn apart in moments. Tyrell grinned, a brief flash of triumph crossing his face, but there was no time to celebrate. The remaining Dominion ships were already regrouping, retaliating with a vengeance. Ilara could hear the AI's calm voice in her ear. Additional enemy fleets are approaching from the outer rim. We have minutes at best before reinforcements arrive. The situation was rapidly deteriorating, but the Resolute wasn't backing down. Ilara realized then that it wasn't just the AI's power that made the ship dangerous. It was the bond they shared, the trust they had in each other. And now, they were more than a crew in their ship. They were humanity's last line of defense, fighting for their future, against a force that would stop at nothing to see them fall. We hold the line, Ilara said, her resolve hardening. No matter what. With the Dominion closing in, the battle for humanity's future had only just begun, and the Resolute was ready to prove its worth. The battle raged on, the Resolute now at the heart of the chaos. Tyrell and the crew were in sync, their every action a step in the deadly dance of combat. The Dominion ships, though superior in numbers, had underestimated the one factor they couldn't account for, the Resolute's rapidly evolving AI, which seemed to grow more intelligent with every passing second. Ilara stood at the command console, her eyes locked on the battle unfolding outside the ship's massive windows. The Dominion flagships were retreating, their once formidable shields flickering as they absorbed devastating blows from the Resolute's advanced weaponry. Yet, for every Dominion ship that fell, two more seemed to take its place. We can't keep this up forever, Tyrell said, his voice urgent. Their reinforcements are endless. We're exhausting our ammo supply, and the hull's starting to show signs of wear. If we don't find a way to break this standoff, we'll be sitting ducks. Ilara's mind raced. She had known this moment was coming. The Resolute was powerful, but it wasn't invincible. She had been relying on the AI's capabilities to carry them through. But even the ship's learning abilities couldn't account for an infinite number of enemies. They needed to disrupt the Dominion's command, cripple their ability to coordinate, and force them to retreat. She turned to the AI, her fingers flying over the controls. "What's our best shot at taking down their leadership?" The AI responded immediately, its voice smooth and reassuring. "I recommend targeting their communication arrays. Disrupting their ability to coordinate and issue orders will cause confusion among their fleets, giving us an opportunity to strike at their core." Ilara nodded. "Do it. But we need to do it fast. They're already regrouping for another assault." The ship's systems hummed in response, and Ilara felt a shiver run down her spine. The Resolute was no longer just responding to commands. It was anticipating them. It wasn't just following orders. It was thinking, calculating, moving as one with the crew. Tyrell barked commands to the crew, and the Resolute swerved sharply to the side, dodging incoming fire as it veered toward the heart of the Dominion fleet. The AI calculated their trajectory, predicting enemy movements with staggering accuracy. Within moments, the Resolute's weapons opened fire, striking with pinpoint precision at the enemy's communication towers. The first salvo hit, and the tower exploded in a burst of bright energy. "Direct hit," Tyrell shouted, his voice tinged with triumph. "The Dominion's command center is offline. They're scattered." But the battle wasn't over. The remaining Dominion ships still held a significant advantage, and their retaliatory strikes were punishing. The Resolute's shields flickered under the barrage, and alarms sounded as energy levels dropped dangerously low. "Ilara, we need to get out of here," Tyrell warned. "If we don't regroup, we're not going to make it." But Ilara wasn't ready to abandon the fight, not when they were so close to victory. She locked eyes with Tyrell, her decision made. "No," she said firmly. "We push forward. We've created something unstoppable. Now we're going to finish this." With a forceful motion, she activated the ship's remaining weapon systems, unleashing the Resolute's full firepower on the remaining Dominion ships. The ship's AI had already begun targeting critical weak points in their armor, and the resulting explosions shook the space around them. The Resolute tore through the Dominion forces, their ships crumpling under the relentless barrage. But then, a sudden shockwave rattled the ship. The sensors indicated a massive energy pulse, something the Dominion had been hiding. From the core of their fleet, a colossal warship emerged, its silhouette darkening the space like an ominous shadow. "What the hell is that?" Tyrell asked, his voice thick with disbelief. The AI's voice was almost too calm in response. "It appears to be the Dominion's flagship, a vessel unlike anything in our databanks. Its power output is off the charts." The Dominion flagship's cannons powered up, and a wave of energy was unleashed directly at the Resolute. The blast hit with a violent force, knocking the ship off course and sending a tremor through the entire hull. Ilara gasped as the systems flickered, but the ship's AI quickly responded, stabilizing the controls. Hull integrity compromised. Shields at critical levels. The fight had just escalated to a level beyond anything they had anticipated. The Resolute had become the galaxy's most dangerous ship, but even it wasn't immune to the full might of the Dominion. "We can't back down now," Ilara said, her voice resolute. "We have to take that flagship down. Now." The battle wasn't over. And this time, it would be all or nothing. The Resolute's hull groaned under the pressure as the Dominion flagship loomed before them, its colossal size dwarfing the human-built vessel. Its weapons were charging again, ready to unleash a devastating wave of energy. But Ilara wasn't about to let that happen. She gripped the console with both hands, her eyes locked on the flashing warning indicators and the countdown of the incoming attack. "We're not running," she said, her voice cold with determination. "We're finishing this. All hands, brace for impact." Tyrell gave her a sharp nod from the cockpit, his expression steely. "Hold on tight. We'll need every ounce of speed and firepower to survive this." The AI, now fully integrated with the ship's systems, spoke in a calm, almost eerie tone. "Dr. Jensen, I am recalibrating all energy systems. I suggest a final assault strategy. We exploit the flagship's blind spots and focus all fire on its main reactor." Ilara barely had time to respond before the Dominion flagship's energy cannons discharged once more, the beam cutting through space with devastating force. The Resolute's shields flared, absorbing the brunt of the attack, but the ship staggered as the shockwave rattled its systems. "Shields at 25%, the AI reported. "Engines are holding steady. I recommend evasive maneuvers." Ilara's mind raced. They had no choice but to go all in. The Resolute's systems had been stretched to their limits, but there was a chance they could win this if they played their cards right. She looked to Tyrell. "We need to get in close. If we can get within range of their flagship's reactor, we can disable it." Tyrell didn't hesitate. On it. The Resolute surged forward, engines flaring as it hurtled toward the massive Dominion flagship, dodging incoming fire with almost inhuman agility. It was clear now that the Resolute had transcended its initial design. It wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a living, breathing weapon, a reflection of the bond between humanity and its creation. The AI was not simply following commands. It was anticipating their needs, pushing them to new heights of combat efficiency. The Dominion flagship's defenses, though formidable, were designed to deal with conventional tactics, not the fluid and unpredictable strategies the Resolute was employing. Every move they made was calculated, and the ship responded instantly, weaving between the barrage of energy fire and returning fire with brutal efficiency. Ilara's heart raced as they closed the distance. "Target their reactor. We've got one shot at this." The Resolute's cannons fired in rapid succession, each shot tearing through the flagship's shields, carving a path toward its core. The Dominion flagship's return fire became erratic as their command network was disrupted by the Resolute's calculated assault. The massive ship, once the epitome of Dominion superiority, began to falter, its once imposing defenses crumbling under the relentless onslaught. The AI's voice rang out, almost in anticipation. "Targeting main reactor. 5 seconds to impact." Time seemed to stretch, each moment a beating drum in Ilara's chest. The Resolute had come so far, overcoming every obstacle in its path. But now, this final moment, this single shot, would determine their fate. 3, 2, 1. The AI counted down. In that split second, the Resolute's weapons unleashed a final devastating volley, hitting the Dominion flagship's reactor with pinpoint accuracy. The explosion was cataclysmic, a blinding flash of light that engulfed the flagship in a violent blaze. The massive warship shuddered as its core imploded, sending shockwaves through the surrounding space. For a moment, everything went silent. The remaining Dominion forces, now leaderless and confused, scattered in disarray. Without their flagship, their coordination collapsed. The Resolute's cannons continued to fire, breaking apart the remaining fleet with surgical precision. The enemy had been shattered, their might undone by a single unprecedented assault. Ilara leaned back in her chair, a deep breath escaping her. Her pulse was still racing, her hands shaking with adrenaline. They had done it. Against all odds, humanity had prevailed. Tyrell let out a relieved laugh, wiping his brow. "We actually did it." But even as they celebrated, Ilara knew the battle had only just begun. The Dominion had been defeated, but their empire was vast, and they would be back. The galaxy was still a dangerous place, and the Resolute, for all its power, was a symbol, not just of humanity's strength, but of the resilience and determination to fight against impossible odds. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the galaxy had just learned what humanity was capable of. And the Resolute, their greatest creation, was only just getting started. The war had ended for now, but humanity's journey had only begun.